Everyone thinks I'm innocent, but I've been secretly living with my ex in a hidden underground bunker, and before you decide I'm the villain with a flashlight and a pantry full of bad decisions, let me introduce myself while the ventilation hums. I'm Lila, 32, a city infrastructure inspector, the woman who knocks on manholes and listens to pipes like they're telling the weather, who reads blueprints the way some people read horoscopes, and who can tell you precisely how long it takes an ungreased hinge to confess. It started with a sound. Not the kind you hear once and shrug off, but the kind that tags you like wet paint. I was auditing old service corridors below the river, making sure the rehabilitation crews hadn't taken temporary fix as an oath when the tunnel coughed. Not the pipes. Not the rats. A human cough, the shy single syllable of a throat remembering manners. I froze with my clipboard midu and my light finding dust like stars, and I whispered, "Hello," because women who work alone in the underbelly of a city know that sometimes politeness is camouflage. He stepped out of a shadow with his hands up like the ending of a movie I didn't buy tickets for. Atlas. 33. My ex, the boy who used to crash on my floors and call it camping, the man who could identify a solder joint by smell, the kind of beautiful that doesn't photograph right because it needs movement to make sense. We hadn't spoken in 3 years, the peace treaty after a war of lost chances, and now he was here in a hard hat that didn't belong to him. He said my name like he'd been saving it for emergencies. Lila. Why are you under my river? I asked, because it was either that or sit down on my own boots and let my heart call the cops. He smiled a little, sheepish and stubborn. I need to show you something, he said. You're going to be mad. You're going to be impressed. Maybe not in that order. He gestured toward a service hatch that hadn't opened since the city was still learning to pronounce itself. I should have called it in. I should have cited him, walked away, filed an incident report that sounded like a sigh. Instead, I followed him because there are moments when your past taps you on the shoulder and doesn't wait for your future's permission. He opened the hatch. Cool air rose up like a promise and a dare. He climbed down first, and I thought of all the times he'd done that, into things I wasn't sure I wanted, into places I wasn't sure I could leave. Then I went after him because curiosity is my ruin and my resume. The ladder delivered us into a room that didn't know what decade it belonged to. Concrete ribs. String lights in neat rows. Shelves of labeled jars that would make my grandmother bless herself. 2 cots disguised as couches. A workbench that looked like a shrine to trial and error. And a map. Hand-drawn, meticulous, documenting the veins of the city from a perspective the city forgot it had. My mouth chose wonder before it remembered fury. You built a bunker, I said. Under the rehabilitation zone. Without permits. With I waved at the pipes, friends. He had the decency to look ashamed. Bunker is a dramatic word, he said. It's more like a maintenance library with snacks. He picked up a mug with a chip like a tooth. Lila, I know what this looks like. But I needed a place to be while I finish the thing. The thing. With Atlas, there was always a thing. A modular water purification system that didn't make a noise above a library whisper. A sensor that would register stress fractures before humans could kiss them better. A life so full of unfinished promises you could mistake the piles for architecture. I used to love his things. I used to lend them my late nights like they were dignified. I used to wake up on shop floors and call it love. What thing? I asked. He flicked on a second light and there it was, a bank of filters and tubing and a hacked-together array of sensors careful as embroidery. It pulls microplastics out at the culvert and returns clean water without needing city power, he said, voice quiet like a confession and a sales pitch had a baby. I've been trialing it. Quietly. Because if anyone knows before it works, they'll own it before it matters. Trialing it, I said, tasting the word. As in, illegally. As in, before anyone can make it a brand, he said, stubborn and tired. Atlas has always had this allergy to authority that looks like courage until it looks like a tantrum. He won't save his own work because he refuses to watch someone else profit off it. He won't file the paper because paper asks you to use a tone he doesn't speak. He won't stop because he's built a self-worth that only answers to breakthrough. And me, I built a life for measuring and documenting, for translating chaos into boxes. Our love failed not because we couldn't stand each other, but because neither of us could spend forever being the translation. I should have left him with a warning and a deadline. Instead, the city shook itself above us, trains confessing their schedules, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the bone-deep quiet that happens when you find a room where the world can't overhear you making a bad decision. It took 3 weeks for me to move in. Not completely. Not with linen and ceremony. Slow. The way a habit moves into your day. A toothbrush in a mug that insisted it was not permanent. An extra pair of boots tucked near the ladder because tunnels have a way of remembering mud. A book nobody else would miss. Then a box of tea because if you're going to build a secret life, you should at least be hydrated. On the surface, I was flawless. Ask anyone. I was the inspector who sent beautifully phrased emails, who listened to foremen swear and made them feel like poets afterward, who could find the one line in a 600-page report that was lying with its eyes open. I went home to a little apartment that plants kept forgiving, and neighbors called me that kind engineer even though my title is more bureaucratic than heroic. I dated a man named Jonah once a week and never told him about the way the city hums beneath his bicycle like a patient dragon. Everyone thought I was a gentle predictability with a good work ethic. Then 5:07 p.m. would arrive and I would descend. Atlas would be there, sleeves rolled, eyes soft, hair a compromise between memory and the present. He'd update me on the sensors. I'd tell him where the crews had actually welded, not where they said they did. Would argue like the old days, our mouths remembering how to keep pace. Would cook on a hot plate and call it a restaurant. Would sleep on cots 6 feet apart for the first week until we didn't, until gravity admitted it had never liked that number. Was it right? I don't offer this like a biography asking to be absolved. It wasn't right. It also wasn't wrong in the cartoon way we use when we want to tidy the edges of a story. It was human. Human like picking at a scab because you can't imagine a tomorrow where the skin doesn't itch. Human like hearing a former love say, "You were the only person who could tell me when my genius smelled like garbage," and feeling your spine nod before your brain gets a vote. We put rules on the chalkboard because if you're going to misbehave, you might as well use complete sentences. Rule 1. We tell each other everything the bunker needs to survive. No secrets about structural risk, no bravado where concrete is concerned. Rule 2. We talk about work like colleagues and about us like archivists. No pretending the past didn't happen, no using it like a coupon. Rule 3. If either of us says surface even mid-sentence, we go. No debates. The city is still a city and we're not the main characters. We broke Rule 3 first, during the storm. You'd recognize the day the river tried to climb its banks and the sky performed a tantrum, entire zip codes applauded. The crews did good work. The old infrastructure did old person things. Our bunker trembled once, twice, like a cough it hadn't scheduled. I grabbed the tool bag, Atlas grabbed the filter array like a father grabbing his baby. We looked at each other and laughed mid-panic, which is a terrible habit and also the only one we understood. Surface, I said. No, he said, then swallowed it. Fine. Surface. We climbed. On the street, the world had its volume all the way up. People ran in a direction that meant somebody had said east. I wanted to help with everything and could help with almost nothing except calling in what I knew. Culvert 17 was lying about its capacity again. The east valve had needed a second set of bolts since March. The old brick arch near the market was holding because it's dramatic like that. I ran with a crew for 2 hours until the sky remembered mercy. I came back to the ladder and found it locked from the inside. Atlas had wedged a bolt through the hasp because he thought some opportunist might find the hatch in the chaos. I banged gently. He banged back. When he opened it, relief made my knees mean something new again. He pressed his forehead to mine, all damp and idiot. You smell like the river, he said. You smell like the inside of a battery, I said. Then we said nothing because sometimes speaking feels like introducing a friend to a mirror. You can live 2 lives as long as both of them are light. When one gets heavy, the other complains. Mine did. Jonah wanted weekends. My bosses wanted overtime. My sister wanted me to finally RSVP to the thing where the thing is adulthood. I wanted to sleep without picturing bolts. Atlas wanted the filter to hit 95% extraction before anyone else learned to spell it. The bunker wanted quiet. The city wanted attention. Everything wanted. One night after I'd been below ground too long, I went above to my apartment and sat on the floor, back against the fridge like a cliché nobody had the heart to evict. I stared at the plant and whispered, "I am building a lie," and the plant said nothing because it was a plant, but the silence translated to, "You also building a truth." On my counter was a note from Jonah, "You are kind in a way that doesn't include me." I read it twice and put it in the drawer with the takeout menus and the spare batteries, the neighborhood of paper that holds the things you won't fix yet. The bunker changed me in ways that weren't cinematic. I learned the exact pitch of a generator that needs a nap. I learned that canned peaches taste like a childhood you can pay rent in. I learned that I could be brave at work and cowardly at love in the same hour and call it balance. I learned the city's belly button, the point where 3 tunnels kiss, smells faintly of mint because some perfume shop above us insists on winning. Living with your ex underground teaches you to re-audit the words you use. We stopped saying always. We stopped saying never. We started saying today I can and today I can't, which is not romantic but is tender in a way romance often refuses to be. Atlas built me a shelf for my blueprints and I didn't call it a metaphor. I cooked him lentils that tasted like stubbornness and he didn't call them a sermon. He'd work late on the filtration model until his eyebrows looked like math and then ask me to read out loud the boring parts of municipal code because hearing rules made him sleepy and safe. He asked once, eyes on the chalkboard, "Do you think we're hiding or practicing?" I said both because the right answer isn't always a kickstand. He nodded. "I want to be a person who can live on the surface," he said, almost to himself. "Me too," I said, like a toast at a party we hadn't thrown. When the inspectors came, I mean my colleagues, not the story police, I was in a hard hat on a Tuesday above ground, showing a crew leader why the camera snake wasn't catching the fracture because his lens needed patience. I saw the 2 city guys with clipboards at the far end of the corridor with the posture of men who expect keys to appear. They walked the line, ticking boxes. My throat went dry and articulate. The hatch to our room wore its age well. It looked like any other hatch tired of being asked to be a hatch. I watched from a distance that looked like disinterest. They passed it. I breathed out like a birthday candle. "Your work is clean," one of the inspectors told me, meaning my drawings and my voice. "Thanks," I said, "yours too," and meant it because I am not the hero of a cop story. I am a woman in a city of women and men trying to make it not collapse on a Tuesday. I went back down that night and told Atlas we'd survived a near visit from fate. He listened with his head tilted, one palm on the pipe like he could hear repercussions. "We can't do this forever," he said. "I know," I said. "We turned off a light like you do when you want to believe it makes a difference. You're wondering what broke it, probably. It wasn't a dramatic discovery or a late-night raid. It wasn't betrayal. We'd already done that in small ways and forgiven it in increments. It was my father. He called at an inconvenient hour to tell me he'd seen me by the river. 'You looked like you were listening to something underground,' he said, and I made a sound people reserve for small burns. My father is the kind of man who believes secrets are just truths that haven't exfoliated yet. 'Are you happy?' he asked, not as a trap but as a primary care question. I said yes and no. He said, 'That's the right temperature for real life.' Then, quietly, 'Your mother would have loved how you always want to fix the machine.' My mother died with her hands smelling like soap and electricity. She never met Atlas, but she would have admired his ruin. I told him a portion of the truth. Not the bunker. Not the ex. Not the blueprint turned into a bedroom. I told him I was working on something that wasn't allowed yet and that I wanted to make it allowed. 'Then you will have to tell on yourself,' he said. Carefully. In a way that doesn't hand your idea to someone who thinks naming something is the same as building it. He said it like he'd done it once. Maybe he had. Parents are archives you forget to catalog. I told Atlas we needed an exit strategy. Not run. Not burn down. an actual plan that used the doors. We would document the filtration results, publish them under a creative license that would keep the Goliaths from swallowing it whole, and present it to the city with a demonstration that included a moral we wrote together. We would reveal the bunker as a proof of concept, not as a middle finger. We would rent an apartment with windows you could argue next to. We would take turns being brave while the other person cooked. We practiced. We cleaned. We put labels on wires like we were expecting guests with questions. We fought about capitalization. I wrote my remarks in pencil because pens are liars. He rehearsed in a whisper like a person warming up for kindness. We picked a date. We scheduled it with the same software I used to schedule permits for concrete. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I went above ground and walked the river where it touches the renovated park like the city is trying on a dress it's not sure it can afford. I thought about Jonah and the note he wrote and how he was right. I had been kind to him like a person loans a sweater. I thought about the colleagues I respect, about the boss who once told me integrity is expensive and then gave me a raise that almost covered the cost. I thought about everyone who thinks I am gentle and the small, sharp edges I carry like a keyring. I thought about who I am under fluorescent light and who I am under concrete. In the morning, we climbed. We carried the filter module in 2 pieces because heroics look better when they're practical. We wore clean shirts we hated and hard hats we trusted. We walked into the meeting room where decisions pretend to be born. I saw the city engineer whose coffee tastes like schedule. I saw my colleague Janine, a genius with a laugh that could lift a manhole cover, and I saw the budget officer who loves to say unanticipated. I put down the module, put down the fear, kept the truth. We've been testing something, I began. I did not say illegally. I did not say in a hidden underground bunker. I said in conditions comparable to high-flow culvert intersections, and watched the engineer sit up. I said, we recorded 91% extraction of microplastics at flow rates that triple normal, and watched Janine reach for a pen. I said, it requires low power and can be retrofitted without interrupting service, and watched the budget officer do math like prayer. I did not look at Atlas. I could feel him next to me, vibrating at a frequency wires dream about. The questions arrived like birds. How? Where? Who else knows? What about maintenance? What about liability? What about failure? I had answers and spreadsheets. Atlas had diagrams and a language that made the room feel included. We did not lie. We did not perform martyrdom. We told on ourselves and offered a way to make it legal. At the end, the city engineer looked at us as if he wanted to buy a second copy of whatever we were selling. Why didn't you bring this to us sooner, he asked, and I almost laughed because the way we did bring it, a bunker, a secret, a compromise, was carved into the nerves of my hands. Because before it was a solution, it was an idea, I said. And ideas need to be fed before they're presented to people with forks. He smiled like I'd performed a trick with numbers. He said he'd pilot. He said we'd need approvals. He said good work. He did not ask us where we'd been sleeping, and that felt like mercy and also like surveillance, but the benevolent kind, the kind you leash to a committee. After, on the street, Atlas leaned against a lamppost and exhaled like he'd been waiting since we were 22. We did it, he said. We did something, I said, because scale is my love language. He looked at me. Can we be above ground now, he asked, not like a threat, like a plea. I looked at the river and thought about the ways water loves to hide and then hates it. Yes, I said. Even if it's temporary. Yes. We went back to the bunker that night not to sleep but to say goodbye. We took down the chalkboard rules and put them in a box. We labeled the jars with a final dignity. We cleaned until the room looked like a room nobody loved and then a room that could be remembered without grabbing. We left a note taped to the underside of the workbench. If you find this, you found an idea's first address. Treat it like an elder. We climbed the ladder slowly, each rung a rung we'd borrowed and now we're returning. Everyone still thinks I'm innocent. They look at me and see a woman who does her job and says please to men with wrenches. They don't see the girl under the river who learned how much of love is maintenance. They don't see the woman who moved into a hidden room because it was the only place her courage and her cowardice could sit across from each other without drawing blood. They see a person submitting a report on a Wednesday. Fine. They can. Here's what I see: a city with lungs and me in a small basement counting its breaths. A man I loved and left and found again, who asked me to help him bring a secret into a room with chairs. A version of myself who learned to tell on herself with enough grace that she didn't have to retire to a myth. Blueprints with fingerprints. Jars with labels. A chalkboard erased and not resentful. Do I still think about the bunker at night? Yes. Do I miss the quiet that sounds like a heartbeat you can sleep next to? Yes. Do I sometimes walk past the hatch and touch it with 2 fingers like a prayer for infrastructure? Yes. Do I want to go back? Less than I want to build above ground. That's new. That feels like a hinge that isn't squeaking anymore. Atlas and I are not a movie ending. We're not kissing in a floodlight while the city applauds. We're renting a small apartment with 2 windows that argue. We cook lentils and complain and make out on a couch the color of an old bruise. We forget and try again. We get permits. We fight about capitalization and then go for a walk. We go to meetings and sit in rooms where people say stakeholder like they didn't grow up on regular words. We put the filter into pilot and stand there side by side, watching water learn a new trick. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I open the window and listen to the city humming. Elevators, lovers, buses getting ready to be useful. I think about secrets and how they can keep you warm until they suffocate you. I think about innocence and how it's less interesting than accountability. I think about the chalkboard note we left and hope some kid with a flashlight finds it and reads it out loud to the dust. My name is Lila. I'm 32. I inspect the places everyone else forgets. People think I'm good because I am careful. They are half right. I'm good because I have finally learned which parts of me go above ground and which parts belong only to the rooms I will never show anyone again. The bunker was not a crime scene, it was a rehearsal space. The performance is life with the lights on. If you ever walk by the river and feel the ground thrum under your feet, that's us. Not me and Atlas, us, the city and the people who love it enough to listen from the basement. If you think I'm innocent, fine. If you think I'm guilty of what exactly, of making a home where there wasn't supposed to be one, of bringing the idea upstairs and setting it at the table. Guilty. Sentenced to time served with good behavior and a clean filter. The latter is still there. It always will be, because a city's underbelly isn't something you tidy and forget, it's something you maintain like a relationship you refuse to lose. But I live on the surface now mostly. I drink coffee next to a window that shows me people being ordinary, which is my favorite genre of miracle. I go to work and say I don't know when I don't, and I was wrong when I was, and here's the fix when there is one. I walk home and hold a hand that has solder scars and softness. I fall asleep to the hum of the refrigerator, the cat practicing park hour, and the faintest, fondest memory of concrete saying goodnight. Everyone thinks I'm innocent. Maybe I am, in the way that means I still believe in repair. Maybe I'm guilty of the same. Either way, I'm here above ground, with maps that leave room for the parts of us that were held together by string lights and stubbornness. And if you ever need me to listen to your pipes or your heart, come with me to the edge of the park where the river pretends it's simple. We'll stand there until we can hear what's actually going on. Then we'll decide whether to climb or to stay. Either way, I'll bring a flashlight and a spare battery, and we'll tell the truth in the key of the city, which is to say low and steady and salvageable.